Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to Stack Talk. So the first topic is supposed to be presented by Dominic, so I think we'll skip it and maybe if he's here, leave it for the end of the meeting. So second, yes, that's it. Second topic is from Pep about handling packages that can be analyzed, like local file or Git. So Pep, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. Yes, the context for this is recent efforts to help some people use Project Thoth and repos that have existing pip files that contain local editable installs and pointers to packages that are hosted as a file instead of hosted as in a package index. So the topic is about how can we best help those people, and yeah, basically this. And I have two sub points or two suggestions. One is about documenting what's happening, why currently, if you try to do this, Quebec will create an issue that looks like scary and something's wrong. If you do it from Tamos, it throws an error, but it's unclear, maybe potentially unclear to someone trying to use Thoth for the first time to understand what's going on. So the first thing I believe we need to do is to document this, explain what's happening, why it is happening, what are the alternatives, and why do we believe that this is not a good practice, or actually the topic to discuss here is what should we document, or what angle should we tackle here. The other point, though, is this was discussed in I think it was a Scrum yesterday, about potentially creating a feature request to Tamos, or maybe, well, this has to go back to the API, etc. But the potential to include an option to ignore or skip dependencies that we don't know about and provide, let's say, a partial recommendation and let the user assume the consequences of this. So that's what I wanted to bring to the table. And this feature request was mentioned by at least someone in the data science group, that they said that it would help adoption, let's say.
I wonder about the do what I mean feature, or the I know what I'm doing feature. Is it that we remove everything that is local, that is editable, or that is from the local file system or so? Because that feels like, well, we are heavily influencing the whole dependency graph, and in the end, we cannot even tell if we have generated an partial advice, because well, obviously it's a partial advice, but we cannot even tell what the quality of that advice would be. It could be complete crap, I guess. So that feels a little bit dangerous somehow. That is why I would, I think I would prefer that the least. But I don't know exactly what it means to exclude all these things, Frida or Maya or any advice person. I think it will, in the best case, generate random results, right?
So I don't think skipping dependencies in requirements files is a good idea, because they were stated in these requirements, and it means people are using them. So that's one thing. The other thing is editable installations were not very welcomed in the community. And if you take a look at standardization in the Python packaging ecosystem, it was there were a lot of concerns about it and rejections, and especially in resolvers as Thoth, I don't think it makes sense to support editable installations. Rather be explicit about that editable installations, either from local file or Git, shouldn't be supported, like explicit that the system does not support it. The reason behind that is that the system does not know what to install from local file system or from Git, and it's not feasible to analyze every Git commit or every file on disk, but rather have Thoth as that authority that knows here is source of packages, meaning Python package index. It can be PyPI, but it can be also corporate index, or it can be your internal company index that you deployed. And this is the instance that hosts all the packages. And in that case, Thoth can resolve these packages, and you know that they are analyzed. They are, let's say, went through some process, so you know that they are released properly, can go to products and things like that, right? And Thoth monitors these indices and can give you information on which packages you should consume. I understand that, for example, in that notebooks that are published, it might be not, let's say, nice to tell people that they should not use editable installations, but in general, it's best practice. And if you really want to consume packages that are monitored, that are checked for security vulnerabilities and can really say this is the trusted content, then you need to host it somewhere, make sure that it went through release process, and Thoth can guide you on these packages.
So okay, I believe that I understand what you said, and all of this, I believe, should be, it's exactly the type of thing that I was thinking to add to the documentation and explain this and make it part of the Thoth documentation to let people understand how things should work. But then the thing is that the reality is that many people are not doing it, and I mean, or at least, I mean, from limited talking to people, but for about editable installs in particular, there's kind of a use case that they explain that kind of makes sense as well. Like, okay, what if I only have a couple of, it's not even a module, a couple of Python files where share code across multiple notebooks that is not worth creating a package for, because it's like just, I don't know, helper code if you want, just to reuse some code. But I need to use that bit in 3-4 notebooks in the same repo, and therefore I just create basically like creating a symlink automatically, so to speak, where the burden of creating a package for this is significantly high compared to, I mean, it's an overhead. So that's one use case. Sorry, to finish the other use case I heard about is from the same repo. Actually, it's an upstream package that provides. There is a PyPI version of the package, but it's a source distribution, and they provide binary builds as well. But out of, you know, they have a table of combination of dependencies, blah blah blah, where they point you to a wheel that you download as a file. So people actually might prefer to go to the pre-built binaries instead of, and they are not hosted in the package index.
I think both use cases are very valid, right? The first one seems to be like a Jupyter Hub problem or a Jupyter Notebook problem, a general Jupyter Notebook problem, because it doesn't seem so far catch that I have common code in a Python file that I use in multiple notebooks. So I guess there should be a solution for that from the from the Jupyter community, right?
That's the case for packaging. Like we have bots that automate packaging, and if you find sources like code that is reused multiple times, the best practice is to package it, have proper versioning, and
Agree.
have it released so you make sure that if there's a bug or security issue, the all affected components get
Yes.
that fixed.
Absolutely agree. That is, as I understood it, the second use case that Pep talked about. Let's have a very easy to use way to create Python modules, because that's the recommended best practice. So the barrier seems to be too high. Let's try to lower it. But what if I just have like a common.py and I use it in 3 different notebooks? I understood that is the first use case, where I just have like one file that has, I don't know, normalized IPv6 address or something like that, and I use it in multiple notebooks. That doesn't seem to me like a package, at least not in Python universe. In Node.js, they're gonna create that package for sure, but I think Python is a little bit different. Isn't there? So I'm staring out the window. There's a quite heavy thunderstorm coming in. That's why I'm a little afraid. I'm afraid of nature. Isn't there a best practice, or shall we research if there's a best practice in Jupyter Notebooks how to use these common.py that I have as a single file with not that many things?
Is it living in the same Git repository? That file?
Yes, what I heard
so,
though is that because we mentioned a potential solution, this was in the context of notebooks that are in the same repo indeed, and they are run in the repo gets spawned into a Jupyter Hub hosted in container, and the solution we proposed was, why don't you set Python path at runtime to point to your local files? And the answer was, well, that works for the notebooks, but not for the pipelines. They later turn this set of notebooks into a pipeline that executes them, and you cannot set Python paths there. Then there is another hack about.
Wait. That's a packaging problem, right? Because
yes, but again, I know we could find a solution, and we could, because it's a container image, we could trust that sys path we can modify it more or less reliably. But again, it's about lowering the making it easy to get on board.
Let's see. It feels to me like we need to find some common good practice for that one, right? And it feels to me it's not really a Thoth problem here, because we are talking about creating Python modules, which is not a problem in our domain, or which is a more general problem. And we are talking about reusing shared code or common code in multiple notebooks or in multiple deployments, like a workflow, like a Kubeflow pipeline.
So
I wonder, yeah.
It might be good to adjust sys path in each notebook in the repository that uses that shared notebook on source code level, right? So you say syspath and append where it should be living. That's a hack within Git repository. If you use, let's say, common script with all the common functions. That's first hack, and I think that's the best hack that you can do. The second hack is I think we discussed it with Trey or Anand that was adjusting Python path in build pipelines. I think that's not a good idea because it breaks or adjusts default import system when you import Python modules, and it applies to all the code, right, that is produced by build pipelines. And then it means you are shifting away from default configuration, and it might produce some undesired behavior when you have Python files on your disk, right? And the third option, that's I think the best option when you have common logic, create one repository, package it. We should provide easy to package solution and deploy and host that common logic. And in that case, you can spread this common logic across multiple repositories. And that's the purpose of packaging. So I think they're using syspath if you have multiple notebooks in one repository and you have shared.
Yeah, let's write that up. Guillaume is insisting data scientists have no skill, or maybe I read over the chat too fast, but it feels like really creating that module is the least preferred path from the data science point of view. Let's explore a little bit. Let's document these alternatives that we have, these options, and let's feedback. I'm pretty sure the people in the Lyra community, like Romeo, they also have an opinion on that one, how to use common code segments. Whoa, Fredo seems to be a little bit frozen. Let's see if he comes back. Is it good for you, Pep?
For me, yes, but I'm not the data scientist going to use.
Yeah, right.
And putting my hat off, trying to play the role of the. I mean, and I'm not probably not qualified about this, but what I heard so far is we're not going to do that, or this is maybe too much for what we have. Like the example you mentioned, there are two situations. Maybe one is like a lot of shared code that to make the notebooks lighter and just put the the shiny parts keep the shiny parts in the notebook and the heavy lifting in shared code. That might be probably more, you could justify better to turn this into a package maybe, but still I would assume there would be some resistance because it has been working forever. But then the other case is the one that you mentioned, Christoph, like common.py, where I have like just common initialization to get the credentials to connect to somewhere, and like a few lines of code that set some variables and get them from the environment and set things up for everything else to work. And that's probably less prone to, or you could justify less making a package out of it because it's.
Let's document it and travel the communities. If they say we absolutely don't understand why we should create modules, what shall I say? I'm not the Catholic Church. I'm not going to raise my flaming sword and tell them. But I think we have very good reasons why it is a good idea to adopt a little bit the software engineering practices and really do that little bit more effort of creating a module. Let's document these few points. I think it's, for me, it's tricky because I see both sides, right? I'd like to have the data scientist just do the work in a nice and easy way, just click and clack and go. But at the same time, we should keep in mind that we want to have.
Well, I believe.
I'm scared.
Yeah, okay. There was like a click clack. Okay.
Cool.
I believe documenting is the very minimum we can do, and then, but at least also I would say the errors that we are throwing now, I would, once we have the documentation, make the errors a bit more friendly by pointing just to an explanation.
Yes, exactly.
And about the feature request, is this something we want to explore a bit more or not? Should we create an issue to review it in more detail?
Yes, let's create that feature request, because I think part of the document that we were talking about will answer that feature request, and we're going to close it.
Okay.
But
yeah,
but it's a good way to document that stuff, right? Why don't we have that force that do what I want?
The way I understand it, Frida, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason why you wouldn't want a partial resolution is because the outcome of Thomas' advice should be a pip file block that actually satisfies your dependencies. So meaning that you do it install and run, and it installs all the dependencies and the thing runs. And if you skip some dependencies, you will end up with a partial pip file log that it will install only a subset of your dependencies, and when you run your application, it will not work. So that's
kind of
any
different than having a sub package, though, because having that source is the same as just having a symlink in your project, and there's no difference. It's like saying we can't resolve like some sub package that you have in your project. It should still be a valid resolution. It just doesn't consider some of the source code.
Frida, I think you're muted and trying to talk. Maybe.
Now, yes.
Yes.
So imagine that you have imagine you have requirements text that you use with pip, and in this file you state your requirements. Now, when you perform or call pip install -r requirements.txt, pip's resolution logic takes that input, that these are requirements of your application, that you stated that these need to be satisfied in order to run your application. Pip resolves application dependencies and provides you all the dependencies and installs them to your environment. If it cannot satisfy one dependency, that means it cannot satisfy your requirements to run the application or to install that application correctly. And in that case, it cannot just say, I installed all of them, I just kept Flask. Because why? You stated Flask or it's one of your dependencies, and it is required to run your application. If it cannot install or cannot resolve Flask for whatever reason, that means that application will not run, right? Because it doesn't meet your requirements. And it's the same as these editable installations. So Thoth resolver is basically resolver as pip. But the problem,
if we have require users to basically state all transitive dependencies of like any editable installations, then it avoids the problem. So if we just make it clear that like to have an editable install, you need to define the transitive dependencies of the local installation.
Say it again, probably.
So like if I have requirements inside my editable install, of course, we're not going to know what those are from Thoth. But if we basically require the user to define any of those requirements in the actual pip file, then it would come up with a valid resolution, because you can just add the original package back at the end.
You mean populating requirements from editable installation to pip file?
Yeah.
That would work, but also that editable needs to be present or needs to be installed into environment. Like when you say this is an editable package in pip, it installs all its dependencies and that package. In case of Thoth, we cannot resolve it and cannot install or say that that code is safe and good to run, because we don't have control over it. And that's the value add of Thoth instead of pip, right? Because Thoth controls all the software, all your dependencies. And in that case, they are analyzed and they're placed somewhere. So
that's why I named the feature request here. I know what I'm doing, because it assumes, like, it delegates responsibility about making sure that this is safe to run, etc., to the user. And part of it is, as Kevin said, the responsibility to make sure that you list all the transitive dependencies. 1 second, Christoph, and then the request would be, okay, tolerate this and add this, installing the package, like basically the editable install version, is create a symlink to it, and it's up to you that if this breaks things or it doesn't work. I know what I'm doing. Well, then if it breaks,
but what you just created, right? You traverse the whole dependency graph. You put all these transitive dependencies that originate from the one editable package. You put all the ones in that whole subgraph, excluding the editable package, into the requirements or in the pip file. And then you told a service which is supposed to help you, I know what I'm doing. That sounds to me like, don't use our service, because you know what you're doing anyways. So how much of help could we be?
It is meant to be, and I understand your point, but I know what I'm doing includes, I know I'm not receiving full advice, or I know I'm not using the service properly. But it's kind of that repo that we had in mind has, I don't know, 20 direct dependencies or so. And I don't know how many transitive dependencies. And just a few files locally. Like, it's like, okay, if we assume that those files are just common.py, as Guillaume said, boilerplate code to just set up the environment or something, like nothing major. And everything else, in that sense, the advice, I know what I'm doing. I know that the advice would cover everything in my stack except just some boilerplate code that really doesn't matter, right?
That's not secure environment. You know what you are doing, but it's bad practice and it's not secure environment. In that case, don't use Thoth. The responsibility of Thoth is to do DevSecOps. So follow good practices and make sure that your application runs in compliance to these practices.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may, and I will try to talk. Yes, but DevSecOps is not always about following exactly the rule, because sometimes there's been a CVE regarding something, but of other means to protect you from this problem. Like, okay, I know there is a vulnerability in this specific package, but I know that anyway this system is not accessible from outside, so that's perfectly fine with the security policy of the company. So that's where sometimes security is more about knowing exactly what you are doing in your specific context than following a very precise, package number or whatever. So I totally agree with you, Frido, and I'm fully advocating for you should always respect that, but there is always the unless you know better, because there is always a context. So
this probably can open discussion to say Thoth, like I want to have secure environment, but ignore this specific CVE because I'm aware of it and I know that it does not influence security of my application. Even that package version has that CVE and is flagged. Let's ignore that CVE because I reviewed it and I'm sure that it does not affect production deployment. The point here is about that code that environment uses. So if you use some code that comes from editable installations somewhere from Git repository, then we don't know what is inside, right? And we cannot say we are fine with using that code because you know what you are doing. In that case, the developer is using some random, not audited code from the internet, and we cannot say it's safe. We cannot say, we don't know that there are CVEs, but we don't know what that code is. It can be some Bitcoin miner or something.
Well,
it should never say it's safe. It's safe. It should always say, have a big warning. I have not been able to analyze this code. So for this part, you're on your own, but it's surely never safe, of course.
I just wanted to say that it might not be a random GitHub code. It might be just my code. It's just like I have it locally, right?
Come on,
it's the same way that we can't offer.
We know you got it on /dot. Don't lie, like everyone.
Yeah. I'll pretend it's mine. Sorry, Kevin?
I was just saying it's the same way we can't offer security guarantees about a user's own code. Like there's no way we can guarantee that they're doing something safe.
That is something that we're not gonna do. That is very true. But I think it is different qualities, right? If I gonna run an advice and Thoth tells me there is this and that CVE, or this and that community is not doing any CI for their code, for their modules, or 50% of your modules are not signed, then I can make an educated decision if I like it or not. But about the editable modules, for example, or the shared code that's living inside the the notebook repository, we cannot make any statements. So what is the value of taking that in and saying we don't know? It's not delivering any value add to the user. Actually, if I gonna take the decision and say, yep, screw you, CVEs are fine, and I don't care if somebody is quality checking his code, then it's at least my decision. But I have hopefully made a good decision based on the information that we have provided. I think that is the general philosophy or the general difference in quality, right? If I can't analyze it, I can't say anything. So that's not what you expect from me, that I can't say anything. What you expect from me is that I can tell you something about this stuff and you're going to make an educated decision. Yeah, exactly. We could just warn about the bad practice and the not analyzed code. But then I wonder what the do what I mean or I know what I'm doing option is for.
No, the warning and bad practice would be the documentation part. So
yes.
Document why this bad practice and why it should be, and then the commands would point you to that document, RTFM and by. Sorry.
Yes. Yes.
And if you are in a controlled environment, such as, I don't know, some bank, you want to have control over your application dependencies. So they need to be properly released. They need to be properly hosted. They need to be properly analyzed by Thoth. So when you are consuming them, you are sure that they are consumed in a right way, yes, and they are secure. By the way, that feature, like ignore this CVE because I'm aware of it, could be good. It can be a nice feature.
Yes, that might be something that comes out of what Maya and I discussed this morning or brainstormed. Final comment to this one. If we take it from a security policy enforcement point of view, and if we're gonna put an SBOM, a software bill of material, on every container image that we have created, and in that SBOM there is stated module ABZ is not analyzable, and StackRox is figuring out, oh, the SBOM is incomplete, I'm not gonna run that software, we have not won anything. So I think, especially in very restricted environments, we should go with our, maybe from a data science point of view, pretty hardcore attitude and say everything should be in module, everything should be traceable, because that is how we're going to provide you security. Or if not super secure, bug-free code, we at least give you all the justifications to make an educated decision. So, and bypass CVEs, I think that should be true for any prescription, shouldn't it? So I should be able to say, well, CI, I don't care. If scorecard CI is giving me a lot of justifications in my advice, I simply don't care. Ignore all of them. Is that, I mean, CVE is just a special case.
This can be a nice flag. Maybe not ignore prescription and make it more generic, because some pipeline units do not work, or there are Python pipeline units not specific to prescriptions. But you can, the very first implementation can use labels. They are already propagated into the resolution process, and in that case, you can say label ignore CVE equals to CVE something, and the business logic of the resolver can easily skip that CVE. So you can write it in the configuration file, or you can pass it as an option on the command line.
Okay, I don't, at the risk of sounding interesting too much, but I'll keep playing devil's advocate. Can you explain me the difference? Like, I'm a new user trying to implement Thoth, and I see this shiny new feature you have, ignore error, blah. What's the difference between this and I know what I'm doing to, ignore my local files?
So you have properly set up your environment, and Thoth can guide you with respect to dependencies that you use. So it can tell you these dependencies are valid resolution and you should use them. So there's no hackish behavior when it comes to editable installations, right? Having some code pulled from Git repository or somewhere else. So you have a properly packaged component as we have components in Thoth. Now you ask Thoth for an advice, and Thoth gives you some resolution. If you ask for security advice, as Julian stated, not all software is 100% CVE free. So if you take a look at, for example, TensorFlow, there are a lot of CVE vulnerabilities, but you manually checked all of them, and your security policy or security department says this CVE does not affect our software because it's very specific to, I don't know, how you obtain data from Google Cloud Storage, and we don't use Google Cloud Storage, right? So it's okay if that package with that CVE is included in the resolution process. So what you can do, you can state, I'm fine with that CVE because it went through company policies and it's marked as okay.
I think the one is blindfold and the other one is ignorance. If you're using that module from your company internal Git that your colleague created, you're basically blindfold. You're just using stuff that you really don't know anything about. Maybe he's a Russian hacker, maybe she's from China, you never know. But ignoring CVEs is just ignorant. You know what you're doing, yes. It's exactly doing what you want it to do. It's working code, and you're ignoring the advice that we gave you. I mean, professional domains, it's a little bit better expressed by saying we had a risk analysis and we came up with a risk mitigation plan and blah, blah, blah. But that's well-educated ignorance, right? As Frido explained. If you're a bank and if you have low severity CVEs in a piece of code that is not used, you can basically put the CVE on the positive list and accept that risk.
Okay. Thanks for the discussion.
Yes, thanks for the discussion, exactly. Thanks for putting all that energy in. All of you.
Okay, so is it all for this topic or anything else? Okay, so I think we are over time. So do you want to go to the next topic or leave it for next time?
Let's take it offline. Maybe we can scribble something up, because I think Maya, you and I, we went from could be a nice topic for an intern to, hey, this is a great way to get features or user experience from Open Data Hub into our system. Maybe we're going to take it for next time because it feels like it might take half an hour to. If you're good with that, or we could just scribble something up and send it to the group. I don't care.
Okay, so we'll leave it for next time. So I think Dominic is not here, so that would be the last topic, right? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording, and thanks everyone.